When we think about wild animals, we usually expect them to avoid humans out of fear. However, penguins are a unique exception, often showing curiosity rather than caution when encountering people. This raises an interesting question. Why don't penguins fear humans? In this presentation, we'll explore how evolutionary factors like predator presence, environmental isolation, and biological responses, such as fear receptors, have shaped penguin behavior and explain this unusual interaction. An important topic to discuss in finding out why penguins don't fear humans is how the rise of predators changes the way animals evolve. Predators can impact animal, specifically prey evolution, both directly and indirectly. I'm going to go over these impacts and relate them to how they specifically impacted penguin evolution. A very obvious way that we can see predators impacting prey evolution is through prey morphological traits. These are physical or structural features of an organism, such as size, color, pattern, as well as internal anatomy, bones, organs. Now, penguins have multiple morphological traits that are evolutionarily affected by predators. Adult penguins are camouflaged with white bellies and dark backs. From above, their backs blend into the dark ocean, and from below, their bellies blend into the bright surface, making it so that predators that put pressure on them from below and above the surface of water, like leopard seals and orcas, have a harder time spotting them. Even their young have colors, gray or brown, that help camouflage them from their aerial predators, skuas and giant petrels. Penguins also have dense bones and torpedo-shaped bodies in order to aid in their escape and high-speed maneuvering abilities against marine predators. Another way that predators can impact prey evolution is by shaping prey behavior. Penguin behaviors that have been shaped by predators are porpoising, jumping in and out of water to confuse predators, synchronous diving, entering the water together so no single bird is targeted, huddling at ice edges to reduce individual risk, and dense colony nesting, which dilutes predation risk. An indirect way that predators can shape prey evolution is by altering the way prey species forage or hunt themselves. Penguins will use coordinated vigilance and ice edge foraging to avoid predators. They will also take into consideration the timing of sea entry and choose the times of day when predators are less active. Now, how does this all relate to why penguins are more curious about humans rather than cautious? For starters, penguins evolved on islands with no natural land predators, with their only predators being marine animals such as leopard seals, orcas, sharks, sea lions, or aerial predators like skuas and giant petrels, so penguins have not developed any fear of land animals. Humans also just don't resemble any of the penguin's natural predators. Humans are slow-moving, don't have a low approach angle, and don't have an aquatic attack pattern. In fact, humans are more similar to penguins than they are to penguins' predators. Humans are bipedal, which often makes penguins perceive humans as just weird penguins. Time-wise, humans have only been around recently when compared to penguins, with fossil evidence of penguins being around 60 million years ago, and humans being around only 300,000 years. For predators to affect the evolution of a prey, a species has to face consistent predation pressure over generations, and with how humans behave calmly around penguins, it just reinforces penguin curiosity over caution.
An important factor in understanding why penguins don't fear humans is their isolated geographic location. Penguins primarily evolved in Antarctica and on remote islands, which are some of the most isolated environments on Earth. Because of this isolation, penguins developed in ecosystems that were missing a key evolutionary pressure, land predators. Most animals evolve fear responses because predators on land repeatedly threaten their survival, but penguins simply never experience that. In isolated environments, evolution works differently. Traits only develop if they are necessary for survival. Since land predators like foxes, cats, or bears were not present, penguins never needed to evolve avoidance behaviors or fear towards land-based animals. This means that penguins' fear systems are selective, not absent. They do respond strongly to the types of predators they actually encounter, mainly marine predators like leopards, seals, and orcas, and aerial predators like squirrels and petrels, but not to unfamiliar land threats. Another effect of isolation is limited exposure to new species. On remote islands, biodiversity is lower, so penguins evolved in a relatively simple ecosystem. Because of this, they did not develop the ability to quickly recognize and generalize new threats like humans. This concept is known as predator naivety, where animals fail to recognize unfamiliar predators as dangerous. Penguins show this because their isolated evolution never required them to identify or respond to land-based threats. When humans arrived in these environments, penguins did not interpret them as predators. Instead of fear, they often show curiosity approaching humans because there is not evolutionary history telling them to avoid us. Additionally, isolation means there has been very little time for adaptation. Even though humans have interacted with penguins in more recent history, it has not been long enough or consistent enough for natural selection to favor responses towards humans. So overall, penguins' fearlessness is not because they lack the ability to feel fear, but because their isolated and evolutionary history never required them to fear land animals. Their environment shaped what they respond to, and humans were never part of the environment.
Another important factor in understanding why penguins aren't afraid of humans is how their fear receptors and brain responses work. Fear in animals is controlled by the nervous system, especially areas of the brain like the amygdala, which processes threats and triggers a fear response. These responses are usually activated when an animal detects something similar to a known predator, like certain movements, shapes, or behaviors. In penguins, these fear systems are not missing. They are selective. They are highly sensitive to the types of predators they evolved with, such as leopard seals or aerial predators, but not to unfamiliar threats like humans. Because penguins never evolved with land predators, their brains do not recognize humans as a danger. Humans don't trigger the same sensory cues like fast underwater movements or overhead attacks that would activate their fear receptors. So instead of triggering a fear response, humans often trigger curiosity, which is why penguins sometimes approach people rather than run away. To go a little deeper, fear receptors rely on pattern recognition. Animals don't just react to anything, they react to specific signals that match past threats. For penguins, these signals include things like fast motion in water, shadows from above, or sudden attacks. Humans don't match any of these patterns. Since there is no evolutionary history linking humans to danger, penguins' brains don't send strong fear signals when they see us. This is an example of something called a mismatch in evolution, where an animal's existing adaptations don't fit a new situation. So even though penguins are fully capable of fear, their fear receptors simply aren't activated by humans. This helps explain why penguins often seem curious instead of afraid. When fear receptors are not triggered, animals are more likely to explore new stimuli. In penguins, this results in behaviors like approaching humans, tilting their heads, or investigating unfamiliar objects. So overall, penguins' fearlessness is not because they lack fear, but because their fear detection system was shaped by evolution to respond only to specific types of predators, and humans don't fit that profile. Penguins' lack of fear towards humans is not because they are unaware or defenseless, but because of how their evolution has shaped both their behavior and biology. Their environments lacked land predators, so they never developed the need to fear animals like humans. Instead, their adaptations, both physical traits and behaviors, are focused on avoiding marine and aerial predators. Additionally, their fear receptors are selective, responding only to familiar threat patterns which humans do not match. Because of this combination of evolutionary history, environmental isolation, and specialized fear responses, penguins often respond to humans with curiosity rather than caution. This highlights how evolution shapes not just how animals look, but how they think, behave, and interact with the world around them. Thank you.